joining us tonight. The DNA mission is to enhance the quality of residential life in the historic landmark district, protect Savannah's unique downtown environment, and advocate public policies which support these objectives. I'd like to thank our sponsors. Each of those organizations have been shown up here on the screen. We appreciate their support. Tonight's social period was sponsored by Catherine Murph and ABR, and speaking for Kath will be Julie Anderson. Please.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm Julie Anderson. I have been working with and for Catherine Murph at Automated Business Resources for at least 16 years in June. ABR is, I guess, sponsoring the cocktail hour. I somehow find that very appropriate.
It is.
And Catherine couldn't be with us this evening, so she just asked me to stop in, say hello, say thank you for the opportunity, and tell you just a little bit about ABR, what we do, and our heart for Savannah. Our president has lived in downtown Savannah for over 2 decades. She certainly has a love for her neighborhood, her community, and our city. She is a visionary who believes in philanthropy, and we support lots of organizations, the Savannah Bananas, the Ghost Pirates, Girls on the Run, the Downtown Neighborhood Association, among many, many others. So thank you for the opportunity to support you guys tonight. I know it's going to be a big meeting, so I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I just wanted to say hello, thank you. Keep us in mind for your copier needs, copiers, printers, whiteboards, shredders. We represent many different product lines, so we can customize proposals for our customers, and we would love to help you out if you're ever in need. So please keep ABR in mind. Thank you. Have a great meeting.
Thank you, Julie. I will reinforce that Catherine Murph has been a big supporter of the DNA and has actually put her home on the holiday tour of homes several times. Beautiful home on Congress Street, I believe it is. So, glad to see everyone survive the St. Patrick's Day parade. Was it only me, or did anybody else notice the only warm day last week was St. Patrick's Day? So, luck of the Irish, all I can say. Joyce and I found it enjoyable and a fun day, and I hope each of you as well had fun. We'll start tonight with hearing from Officer Blake from Savannah PD about crime and other issues that occurred on St. Patrick's Day as well as on the highway, or the holiday weekend. The weekend, I guess. As Officer Blake walks up, sadly Corporal Flynn could not make it tonight. His father passed away over the weekend. Our thoughts and prayers are with him.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I'm Officer Blake. I work alongside with Corporal Flynn at the Northwest Precinct as the NRO for those who I haven't introduced myself to. Like he said, Corporal Flynn could not be here tonight, but here with me I have Lieutenant McFall and I have Sergeant Sapp for one of our sergeants for one of our watches working tonight. So as we were looking at the crimes over the last month or so, we did see a decrease as far as like our entering autos and auto thefts. We had a total of 5 entering autos from the last month or so and 1 auto theft. With the entering autos, the trend we saw, it was either the doors were unlocked, which made it easy for them to get into them, and they took valuable items such as like money, cards, things of expense. And if the doors were not unlocked, they smashed the windows, of course. But we didn't see much of smashing windows, and mostly it was the doors being left unlocked. So as far as that, we just want to educate you guys on making sure that you're leaving the doors locked, don't leave nothing at value inside the vehicles. We did have an incident where someone was able to spot the males breaking into his vehicle. He was able to chase down one of them, but unfortunately, I believe he had like a kitchen knife on him. So we just want to educate you guys that if you see something, try to call us, but don't try to fight them, don't try to chase them because you don't know what they're carrying on them. Other than that, we have seen a decrease as far as with entering autos. our CSU unit, our crime suppression unit, since they've started back up, they have made at least 3-4 arrests as far as juveniles that has been involved with the entering autos and the auto thefts. And as far as the St. Patty's Festival, we had 12 arrests in the event zone. We had 6 that were drug related, 52 DUI arrests, which 4 was SPD and 48 by GSP, 44 alcohol checks, 12 of the businesses failed, 58 vehicles were towed from the parade route.
Good gracious. Thank y'all.
Other than that, did we have any questions for me tonight?
We have a different format for tonight's meeting. Instead of having a presentation from a specific group or entity, we will instead be hearing from you, the residents and members of the downtown community. With the recent video that we sent out capturing the Savannah tour for morons, showing the rowdy and noisy bus that was there, the board decided that after receiving many comments and complaints from residents, that it'd be a good idea to focus this meeting strictly on quality of life issues and hear the comments from you directly before we meet with the city. So we changed the format of this meeting for that purpose. We invited city officials to come, the city manager and Susan Broker. Sadly, Susan Broker was sick today and was unable to make it, and the city manager had another meeting to attend to, so he was unable to make it. Sadly, they did not send any staff to take notes. The board, however, will schedule a follow-up meeting with them in a couple weeks after we gather all of the information from you and the comments and the concerns about that. And let me correct something. Philip, I apologize. He is he works the city manager's office and is the community liaison. I'm sorry, Philip, I forgot. Thank you for raising and giving me the fist. I appreciate it. I was wrong. I'm sorry about that.
Wait.
So this is not a Q&A at the time I don't expect Philip to address any issue specifically. It's to hear your comments. We will take notes, have people taking notes up here. We will then meet with the city manager and tourism industry to talk to them about our comments and concerns. So while discussing the format of this meeting with several people in the last couple of weeks, several of them said to me, doesn't living downtown mean to expect noise and crowds? And that's common, you should have that. So I always told them, correct, that is what you expect from downtown. We expect to hear sirens, trash trucks, delivery trucks, cat buses, loud radios playing in cars driving by or stopped at traffic lights, even drunk people singing at 1 a.m. as they walk to their STVR. Those are typical noises we hear constantly living downtown. These are mostly uncontrollable and short, brief. But living downtown does not mean having a continuous stream of tour buses, walking tours, Segway tours, bike tours, ghost tours, and others all taking up sidewalk space, spewing black smoke from their exhaust and speaking loudly so the guide can be heard while either walking or on a trolley. These are controllable events and should be monitored and maintained. These are not typical of living in a downtown environment. My wife Joyce and I have lived in downtown in several cities, DC, Lower Manhattan, and in other states that Joyce doesn't want me to mention. These tour volumes are not typical in a downtown environment. They're just not. They can be controlled and managed. To prove what we mean by the continuous tours that residents in Washington, to prove what we mean by continuous tours, the residents in Washington and Warren Square conducted extensive research into the local tours and compared what they found to several other tourist destinations. What they found was incredible to me. But before I introduce them to you, I wanted to read you an email I received last night from a DNA member who read the newsletter about this meeting. She lives here part-time and is currently in Chicago. She was very glad to see we're talking about quality of life. And here's her quote. Unless there is a big picture, so much that is essential and precious in a city can be lost bit by bit, barely noticed in real time. And that's what we're seeing now, incremental loss of quality of life. So here to share the results of their research and to begin painting that big picture is Nancy Rand.
And documentable, and be able to share them, not only with other neighbors in the downtown area, but also with city officials and tourism officials, because if we don't put meat on the bones of our feelings, and oftentimes our feelings are very correct, but if we don't put some flesh to them, then there's no way for other people to begin to appreciate it. So I thank you for being here. I know we're going to be talking about just one tiny aspect of the tourism, but I think it's a case study, and I hope it'll be helpful to you. I want to, without any further ado, I want to introduce the other members of the committee who have been so instrumental in putting this deck together. Rick and Kristen Fiano, if you stand up when I introduce you, then if you have questions you want to address to them, they're there. Also, Susan Kreutzmann, Dean Donegan, and Steve Mott. There we are. All right, Steve, residents for responsible tourism from Washington and Warren Squares. Okay, let's see here. Let's get started. So, what is responsible tourism? I mean, we have hung our hat on this, and we think that this is an important thing to define. So we didn't have to look really far for a really good definition of responsible tourism. It's in the community vision, a Savannah community vision that says, Savannah's tourism partnership embraces the vibrant future while maintaining its historical integrity and respecting the unique residential and pedestrian quality of life. Our community must be balanced, sensitive, and well managed to assert an enhanced quality of life for residents and a high quality of visitor experience. You'll notice that I highlighted a whole bunch of stuff in the middle, and you know why? That's because that's all about quality of life and the actual environment that we live in. And the bracketing on the either end is all about tourism. So at the very heart of any good tourist experience, people know is a vibrant community, and that's what we're talking about here. So where did I get this lovely statement? Well, I got it directly from the City of Savannah's 2018 Tourism Management Plan. And I encourage you all to go on the city's website if you have not read this, because it's an interesting document. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Some things have been actually instituted. Some things have been instituted and abandoned. Some things have been litigated away. But there's things in here that are at least a beginning point from which we can build. So a lot of investment and a lot of work and a lot of goodwill went into this document, bringing together residents, city officials, and also the tourism industry. This is a terrific start point, but it's been 5 years. We had a pandemic, and basically it's been kind of kicked to the curb. So it's our responsibility now to bring this back into the forefront. So let's get right back into the tipping point, back into the place where it all started for our neighborhood. We all see things happening, a little something happens here, it disturbs us, it piques our ire, and we forget about it. And then again, something else happens, but there comes moments in life where you just can't ignore an issue. And this was the catalyst for our committee and our committee's work, was this particular incident. Or not really incident, it happened several times. So we filmed this on February the 18th. It's a trolley traveling from Bay Street on Price up to the Broughton intersection. And I'm just gonna play it for your enjoyment. Is it coming through?
Yep. Not there. Steve, is yours working?
Are we still hooked up there? Not working?
There we go.
It's a local favorite for a local. Here we go.
squares or the cities of, areas of Savannah? Okay, well, that is an example of what I would call the new trend in tourism towards look at me and noisy tourism. It really, there are many other instances in other cities, but this was the Savannah for Morons comedy tour. A new type of tour. You know, we had ghost tours, that's yesterday. Now we have comedy tours. But actually, it's interesting, this is not a new tour. It actually has existed in Savannah. It's operated by the Front Porch Improv Group, and it was on a Kelly bus that was enclosed, and absolutely nobody noticed it because it was inside, which is a good idea. And then in February, it hopped to Old Town Trolley that only has open-sided buses. And that's when we became aware of this particular noise-producing and inappropriate to the historic district tour. In fact, it's a tour that I think you don't have to be a moron to know that it is breaking every noise ordinance in the city. So this now begins the negotiation phase. We have to get the attention of city officials to begin to talk through them, through Susan Broker's Office of Special Events, Film and Tourism, to get the trolley company to shut the tour down as it should be, because that's city law. But the first suggestion was that they just put speakers underneath the seat and ask the cast to tone it down. Well, we all know that's not gonna work. And then the next impulse, when we said that that wasn't gonna work, was to, well, okay, fine, we'll just move it away from the cranky people's square into another square. And you know what? That doesn't work either, because that's not why we're here as a group in Downtown Neighborhood Association. What's good for our square is not as good for your square, but what's bad for my square is also bad for your square. So it's important that we are a singular voice when it comes to these things and not allow them to be just shoved around to other parts of the city. Then, and that was the rerouting of the tour. Then the next suggestion was that they would finally buy an enclosed bus, but because there were supply chain problems, they wanted to have the tour just keep running. Again, we had to stand on principle. This is breaking the city's ordinances. And so even though they tried it again with a used bus, but please wait, please be patient, the negotiations went on, and Susan Broker's office finally suspended the tour and waited until an enclosed vehicle could be secured. That's just one battle. So we have a lot of other things that we know are going on with tourism and are being overrun by trolleys and buses and other kinds of things. So we decided to focus like a laser on this issue of trolley and vehicle frequencies in our streets. And we decided that what we had to do is get some fact-based insights, not just feelings, because we know that feelings do not work with anybody. So even though your feelings are right, they don't work. So we created our own study, and since we have absolutely no funding, we decided that we were going to use open access data, okay? And that was easy. Every trolley company has their own website. They have all their tours listed so that tourists can sign up for them, right? The next step was, okay, what cities are we going to compare ourselves to? So we set up a couple of criteria. First, it has to be in the South with a 365-day tourism. No good comparing ourselves to Boston because they have to shut down for the winter. It had to be a tourist destination, but also with some historical interest like Savannah. And finally, it had to have one or more trolley companies in common with Savannah. So there were 3 cities in the South that met our criteria. And some of them are natural ones, like Charleston and Asheville and St. Augustine. Oftentimes, because of our proximity, our history, and even our population size, Charleston and Savannah are set in the same breath when it comes to tourism studies. Asheville is an emerging tourist center. They're really pushing their tourism now. And we thought, even though they're a smaller population-wise city, it would be an interesting comparison. And St. Augustine kind of looks like the outlier down there at the bottom with a population of 14,734. But when you compare that to the downtown historic district, we're pretty comparable with, we have only 19,833 people listed as residents in this part of the city. So those are our 3 comparative cities. And the first thing we did was find out what annual visitation was like in those cities. So already, Savannah is out in front. 15.2 million visitors, all right? We're beating them all, you know, much more than Charleston, right? And they're like a city the same size as we are. Well, why on earth could that possibly be that Charleston has so many fewer tourists? Well, part of it is, they always say Charleston goes for the high-class tourism. You know, they always talk about wanting to be, Savannah wants to be more like them, have a better quality of tourist who spends more dollars. And Charleston does it by regulating tourism a lot. They have no open container rules. They will not allow certain types of vehicles to travel their streets because they're historic and old. And so they do set boundaries that perhaps repress tourism, but maybe that's not a bad thing in their case. Asheville, on the other hand, is very, very actively promoting this idea of young people coming into the city to drink, to party, to have beer and beer and bands on trolleys. So they're more like Savannah in that regard, that they are promoting a younger crowd to come to Savannah or Asheville, and their numbers are growing just as ours have grown. At little old St. Augustine, it's just tiny, but it doesn't have many fewer tourists than Charleston. So you can see it's kind of an interesting dynamic that's unexpected when you start to compare all these different cities. Now, what was our process for data collection? So first we determined how many trolley companies were working in each city. And then we went to the websites of each of those companies to see how many specialty tours they offer. You know, ghost tours, comedy tours, hop on, hop off, all those sorts of things. The next thing we did was then count every single departure on every single specialty tour for every day of the year in all 4 cities. 56,050 individual departures were counted for this study. It was kind of annoying, but it was good. It was interesting. And what did we learn? All right, there it is, folks.
That's amazing.
Interesting. Again, but even more so, Savannah's really the outlier here, with 31,073 listed departures annually. Holy mackerel, our 2 peer cities of Charleston and Asheville are way back in the weeds. We've got 475% more than they do. Part of it again is that we just have a lot more things going on. Can you actually see that chart now that it's big? I hope so. Yeah, sort of. And we can always let you have a copy of this if you want. But this is actually the data collection sheet, just so you can see the due diligence that we did. So we have Charleston up here at the top, and Savannah, and then Asheville and St. Augustine. Both Asheville and Charleston have 2 tour companies running, but notice the difference in numbers of offerings of tours. This just has 1 tour each. They have about 7 or 8 different tour offers. So this is how things begin to multiply. When you have all these companies offering multiple tours, that's what we have in Savannah. So who are our trolley companies? Well, the biggest one is Old Town Trolley, and then that's followed by Old Savannah Tours. And Old Savannah Tours was our original trolley company. And when Old Town came in with hop on, hop off, you know, loop service every 20-minute departures, Old Town did the same thing. Kelly and Gray Line is a little bit smaller. They only have enclosed buses. Hearst Ghost Tours, well, you know, they're out there running around the streets at night. And also the Savannah Heritage Tours. These are the ones we used, although I know there are a few other smaller ones, but these are the bulk of the tours that we wanted to count. Okay, great. We got this information, now what? So, inspired by all of this, neighbor Steve Mott decided that he would put a security camera up on his balcony on the 500 block of East Bryan Street in Washington Square. And it's a great one. It's a camera that's triggered by any vehicle passing by, and it takes a little 3-second video, And what you can do then in that little 3-second video is you can actually see what kind of vehicle it is. Is it a trolley? Is it a motorcycle? Is it a, ice cream truck? Whatever it is, you can see it. And Steve counted all of those. And we ran that tour 24/7, or that test 24/7 from March 1 to March 7. And here's what we found. We had 4,087 vehicles come down little old East Bryan Street during that period, and of those, 642 were tour vehicles. Wow, sounds like a lot. That's a lot. But how does that stack up to what was reported in the departures? Well, we went back in and we looked at the schedules for all the different companies, and what we found was that here in green are the actual listed departures on the websites, okay? And you can see in the blue, the numbers that were going down East Bryan Street are topping that number by a lot every day of the week. So this gives us, provokes a couple of questions and some takeaways. First of all, East Bryan Street and Rainbow Row seem to be the part of every single tour that leads every single point of departure. Every tour, all of them, and more. But why are there more? Why are there more, not just what they schedule? And how can this be? Well, the city says the bus is only so big, right? But if more people show up for the 9 o'clock departure of the hop on, hop off, let's say 70 come. Well, let's see, and the bus is only for 34. Well, they could put on 2 more buses. 3 buses now leave the departure point rather than just 1. So you can see how this kind of thing can begin to multiply and multiply. And also, there are no city-imposed limits on the number of tours. So next week, if Company X is jealous that they don't have a comedy tour, they can put a comedy tour on. The frequencies of tours. That means that if you have a hop-on, hop-off bus schedule that's listed as running every 20 minutes, nothing to stop you from making that every 15 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes. You see how this can get out of hand. Also, is no schedule on the times of the tours. We have tours coming by at 11 o'clock at night. It used to be the tours ended at 6, but then when ghost tours began to be popular, suddenly evening trolley rides are also a part of the mix. Another thing we found interesting is that the numbers are actually increasing since our study. When we started this study, it was still pre-tourism season, and on that Thursday, the 2nd of March, we only had 98 go through. We decided to turn on the camera again the day before St. Patrick's Day, and that's kind of what I would say is the official start of tourism season. Wow, 8% more, 121 vehicles went by. So I'm sure you're just dying to hear what this sounds like, and I'm gonna only make you listen to one. But what I want you to do is listen to the noise that comes out of this bus. Oh, and I'm stopping it right here, because I want you to see how close that passes to the building on the left. It's a narrow street.
Bill and Barbara.
I can still hear him narrating all the way down to the end of the block at Price Street. All right, let's see here. Nope, not gonna do that yet. Okay, well, one of the wise people in our neighborhood who was at one time associated with the city government said to us, you know what you need to do? You need to become experts in the codes of Savannah. And you need to know how to use them to apply to various issues that are plaguing you. And that way, you can actually get some action. So we thought, wow, what a great suggestion. Kind of hard, because once you start looking at code, there's a lot of it, and I do have some link or ways to get to see the code in the city's website. It's not hard. It just takes a lot of reading to plow through it. But we found a few code violations in all of this too. And one of them has to do with the number of trolleys in the square at a time. There's only supposed to be 2, but we did a hand count on March the 4th where we sat up on the porch for a couple of hours and just jotted down who was passing by. And you can see that in a 5-minute period we had 6, but boy, because there are so many departures all coming out at once, you get this clumping thing, and within a minute we had 4. And for sure, there was a code violation there. Very hard to document, very hard to get any action on, but it happens all the time. The other thing that was interesting too is that we realized that each tour service has to submit a map to the city manager for approval. And although I have not delved, and I will full disclosure, into the city manager's possession of these maps, I did find it curious that when you went to the various websites of the tour companies to see what their map was, what their trolley line route was, only Old Town Trolley had it actually delineated that they were coming down East Bryan Street. Not Old Savannah Tours that I'm showing here, shows it going around it, but nor does the Gray Line Tours have any kind of indication what streets they use. So certain streets are definitely getting overused, and this is another issue we probably will look into a bit further. And there's another code violation. Back about 20 years or so ago, this area of the 400, 500 block of St. Julian and Washington Square were described in the city code as a restricted area because of abusive tourism, mainly ghost tours standing in front of the Hampton Lillibridge house. And so there is a code that says that between 9:30 p.m. and 10 a.m. during our actual review of these things, you're not allowed to have tours coming through. And yet, here we have one. Oops, sorry, back up. Oh, back up 1, 2 more. Sorry about that. I'll go over to the slide, it's easier. That's 9:08 on the 16th, and we know that that's an actual tour because of the narration. If they were just repositioning buses, they would blow through there without any word. So on that day, 21 trolleys passed through before 10, and 4 came after 9:30. One is as late as 10:30. So that again is another code violation that we uncovered. And let's see here, what else did we find? Yes, noise in a residential zone. Well, that's supposed to be limited basically to 60 decibels or 50 decibels, depending on the hours. But essentially what that means is I'm standing here, there's a person standing 3.5 feet from me, and we're having a normal conversation. Okay? All right, let me play this for you. This is taken from inside a historic home, through a closed window with a single pane glass, which we all know in our historic homes is the only kind of glass we can have, right? That's our only option. Here we go. And there you have it. What do you think? A noise ordinance, has a noise ordinance been broken here? And indeed, there's an ordinance for this. There's a regulation on sound equipment and sound amplifying equipment. And so basically, you can't have amplifiers and loudspeakers or similar devices that create noise disturbance across real property boundary. Did it do that?
Yes.
Okay. Create a noise which is plainly audible other than to the occupants when such device is operated in or on a private motor vehicle or a public right-of-way or public space. Did they violate that? Yes. Okay, cool. And this other one has to do with public buses, but it's the same ordinance. So our key takeaway here is that every tour bus, trolley, with open signs and amplified narration is out of compliance, just like the Savannah's for Morons comedy tour. So yes, to answer our own question, we are being overrun. And we are also finding that things are not being enforced, and we really need responsible, well-managed tourism now more than ever. So let's just see what that might look like. So here's some ideas that we put together of what we need the city tourism leaders to do. First of all, acknowledge that we are at a tipping point and that there are limits to the growth and amount of tourism that Savannah can sustain. Holy mackerel, this is so fortunate, it's already been acknowledged. Look at this. Oh my gosh, right out of the Longwood Report, that's a tourism survey that's made every year to document how wonderful the tourism industry is. It says tourism officials, and this is a quote, can't get caught up in the words. Bigger, larger, more. Savannah's historic district was not designed to accommodate 12 million visitors, let alone 13 million or 15 million. Right? And who said that? Joe Marinelli,
Yay.
President of Visit Savannah. Thank you, Joe, you are right. And we agree with you. And that is really important. But what's also interesting is he said this in 2011 when we only had 2.1 million visitors. Well, golly gee, here we are at the last year that they have reported visitors for, and we're at 15.2 at the top of that limit. So we thought, wouldn't it be interesting? The Chamber of Commerce says basically tourism is growing at 3.5% annually. So we thought, gee, what happens if we project out to 2029? 20 million! That's how we're growing, and it's growing like this all the time. And you know what? It's really gonna get tight here soon. So what are the types of tours? These are all the kinds of things that have to jam themselves into this same one finite square mile. Every tourist is in there. All of these different tours are in there. It's getting to be quite crowded, as we can all attest. And, but I don't want you to worry. In 2019, the tourism leadership starts to sing a different tune. They come up with what I'm calling the big box theory, all right? Basically the concept is, and I'm gonna paraphrase here, is that tourism has always fit into the historic district. But don't worry, we're just making the box bigger. And we can see that. We see cranes everywhere. We see that they're doubling the size of the convention center, right? And they're also promoting tourism in other districts. That's nice, you know, Victorian District, Starland District, that's all lovely. But the fact of the matter is, people are not gonna fly here from Cincinnati and say, I am going to see the Starland District of Savannah and never walk downtown. We know 20 million people will eventually arrive in that one finite square mile. So, I think that we need to reinvigorate the tourism management plan of 2018 and put some teeth into it, into the tourism management part of it, and also into code enforcement. And what might that be? Well, we could maybe propose that they rein in pro-tourism advertising, which brings more tourists to the city. I mean, tourists are gonna come, we know that, but I think we've gotten to the point where we've said, we are great, we are beautiful, come and see us. Perhaps a switch in thinking would be to promote and advertise instead quality tour partners who commit to responsible tourism principles. Another idea would be, and this is in the tourism management plan, is to institute the medallion system to control tour traffic. That's important, and it's important for not only getting the massive and growing numbers of vehicles, trolley vehicles off of the streets, but when you start adding as many tourists to this city as we have, when you start filling the box bigger, right? That means that we now have more hotel rooms, we have to have more service vehicles in order to service all of those hotels and all of the different things that need, places that need to be cleaned and
Unknown caller.
hello. And anyway, so those are all the things that begin to impact this 1 square mile, and it's important that this comes under control. And finally, we need to add enforcement staff and a robust city management. They are working on that, I know, but we've been told that they're taking baby steps. They need to start taking leaps and bounds, because It's an important part of quality of life, and it's also an important part of the tourism experience. All right, the other thing is we need to actively encourage and incentivize those tourism people that respect and value and celebrate what Savannah is all about, its livability, and all the efforts that they might do to reinforce and help this city and the residents have a more beautiful and livable city. So what might those incentives be like? Well, what if somebody starts to move towards clean energy vehicles? How about if they mandate in-ear narration technology? You know, they have it all over the world except here. And the thing is that tourists like it because they can oftentimes hear, they don't have to crowd around the one person who's speaking, and they can wander around and see what's beautiful. You can reward tours that create richly accurate narratives. I guess since we're not allowed to tell them what to say, if they do say the good stuff, we can reward them. All right, we can create quiet times in residential areas like they have in Washington Square. We can also vigorously protect. Now this is something new and emerging. How many of you have seen e-vehicles and bicycles racing through squares and on sidewalks?
Yeah.
It's scary, no? Savannah is known not only for its historic beauty and everything, it's a walkable city. People love it because they can walk everywhere. It's fabulous. And so if we lose that walkability because, and I see this all the time right now, people are flying through the squares on e-vehicles, we're gonna lose another big chunk of what makes this city so special. So I think we have to prohibit dockless vehicles in the landmark district. We gotta close down the illegal e-vehicle businesses that keep popping up. Get those Lulu rides off the street. We have to increase and properly place signage alerting any of those wheeled vehicles that might want to go through the square that are owned by individuals that we can't control, that they are prohibited from riding in the squares. Education is everything. They do have a few signs, but they're in places where nobody can see it, so it's important to put them where they're visible. And we have to create some more safe routes for those wheeled vehicles throughout the town. Bike lanes, scooter lanes. Let them have a space on the street, but again, wink wink, it's gonna mean that we have to take some other things off the street. All right, and the last one, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but no, I'm kidding. Enforce, enforce, enforce. It doesn't matter, we have a lot of really great ordinances, but if we have to do all the code enforcement as downtown neighbors, and we do sometimes feel that way, we need help, we need teeth. We're not officials, but we need that tourism ordinances protected, expanded, and actually upheld, because it doesn't benefit just us. It really does benefit the tourists as well. There are many people in STVRs who don't want to have a party all night STVR next door. Okay, so here are some other things I think that would be great. From the tourism management plan, let's reinstate those wonderful Savannah Serves ambassadors. I miss them. They were great. They were wonderful and smiling and helped people out on the street and showed hospitality to the tourists. And they also were eyes and ears and boots on the ground that could help code enforcement and the police department in real time. Let's also install some cameras, you know, that have the ability to have to take pictures of those speeding vehicles and revving engines and all of those kinds of issues that we have on the street that plague certain areas of the city. And let's also limit rooftop bars and decks to unamplified music. I mean, some people might actually like to talk to people, each other while they're up there sipping their cocktail. And install decibel monitors so that they can actually be enforced through, you know, without people having to stand over it and make reports up. So I want to end this by saying, don't kill the goose. All right? Look, it took 70 plus years of historic preservation efforts, billions in restoration work, and decades of landscaping squares, tree lawns, and parks to make Savannah beautiful again. It also took the bravery of citizens and civic leaders in the 60s to resist the wrecking ball that gutted so many historic cities, so that we might continue to enjoy the tranquility and the cohesive historic fabric of the residential and civic architecture built upon the Oglethorpe Plan. All this has made Savannah truly a unique, living, and authentic tourist destination. Obviously, in this metaphor, we are the geese, right? Okay, because we continue to act as the stewards of this heritage that was set up by all these people before us. We maintain our properties and gardens, and we create local jobs when we need help from the trades. We use local services, creating jobs for accountants and manicurists and everybody else in between. We shop local, eat local, and of course we drink local. We support the arts, sports teams, and charities. We support the common good, basic services, schools with our taxes. We add value in so many ways to Savannah and are honored to live here and to welcome others to enjoy it too. Whoops, 1 second, I got one more switch. All this has created the profitable golden egg for the tourism industry, but we must push to maintain a balance between residential livability and commercial gain. Crossing a tipping point is irreversible because you can't go back by undoing small changes. Before it's too late, it's time for residents, city officials, and tourism leaders to come together in our common interests and renew and reinvigorate Savannah's tourism management plan. Thanks. That's all I have to say about that.
Parade of tours on a daily basis from 9 a.m. to well past dark that include back-to-back trolleys with loudspeakers, Segway tours talking very loudly and blocking traffic, the buses spewing thick black smoke. None of that was prior to the pandemic. It has increased over the last few years. Now they're constantly doing that. And to make it worse, the Segway tours, while they're in the middle of the street, are talking and criticizing the residents who live there and saying, oh my God, they pay so much for these homes, look at these, and criticizing them on a tax us on the price of their homes. It's almost insulting and salt to the wound. This is ridiculous. So.
I work with code enforcement. Unfortunately, their position without the staff, they say, is complaint driven only. It's not our job to do that, as has been made so clear by Nancy. 2 quick things. I have been here 30 years. When I came, I think one park had commercial in it, and it was that man who's still there selling his prints at Johnson Square, our oldest and largest historic square. For some reason, he's grandfathered, and it continues. Did you know he pays $85 a year for that permit? If I got that, I'd be there tomorrow with a business. Now I have counted 5 public spaces, 4 squares, and Forsyth Park, I understand, in the south end, is now open for business, not just on Saturday, but now people are being able to get permits to do that. Our public squares are not commercial space. I hope we communicate that. And finally, the maintenance of the Savannah area with graffiti and stickers all over brand new like lampposts is unconscionable. So I commend Nancy. I want to bring you a great big bunch of roses right now and all your group. With a group effort, I think we can't lose. And with individual fuss budgets, we can't win. So hurrah, and let's do it together.
Nancy mentioned the vehicles in the squares. State law prohibits anybody from riding bicycles on any state sidewalks if you're not 12 years old or under. And the city has an ordinance to prevent wheeled vehicles in any of the squares. So if you see one there, it's a violation.
Enforcement.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
That was a great presentation. Is it available online if we want to go look at it so we can pick and choose points?
We will be putting the presentation on our website. The whole meeting will be being videotaped. We'll put that on our YouTube page as well as our Facebook page and make it available to everybody who wants to read it.
Well, I don't think I need this, thank you.
You
Okay. I'm an economist, I was on the DNA board for a lot of years. First point, if we want to decrease the usage, we increase the cost. I mean, it's a simple economic principle. You increase the cost of coming here, we will have fewer people. That is how a market economy works. You might not like that, but we should think of ways to increase the cost of every tourist service, maybe fees for every trolley that goes by. We need to increase the cost. Second point, be a little careful about the number of 15 plus million. The tourist advocates came up with those numbers. They include people who come to Savannah for various reasons. I just want you to be careful using that. It doesn't mean the people who are coming as tourists.
Your statistics on the tour companies include the slow ride companies, is my first question.
No.
And secondly, I've noticed that some of the slow rides go around a square more than once. Is that legal? Do we know?
I don't know that.
The slow rides are restricted to north of Oglethorpe, west of Abercorn, and then go to Bay Street, and that's it. So they're probably, to keep them drinking, they'll probably go to multiple squares multiple times.
Exactly.
You can
So
say
that,
something else?
that could be the reason for more than one.
Correct, one loop around.
Yeah.
It depends on the square. I mean, the concept of how many loops you can make started back in the 90s after the book, where certain squares limited one revolution around the square. But that was at specific places for the trolleys. I don't think that was applied to
I
them.
don't think the slow rides have.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. By the way, that was amazing. I have a question about, is there currently a regulation on how many times a singular tour bus company can go in one path? Or is there a regulation in what one segment of a street can have per day of tours, or there's no such thing? Okay, so that's a huge problem. The other one I wanted to mention was, in all your suggestions to the city, the Segway tours really need to have headsets, because they're the ones screaming to the people that are like not being able to keep up all the way back there, and the woman is crashing against the sidewalk, and it's not even historic and informative. They have started to really shout out what we're paying for our homes. It's insulting, it's degrading, and it's not funny to be out there sweeping the sidewalk and just be mocked. Literally, this man is just segueing, saying 5 million, you know, and this goes on and on all day long. He has the same spiel. So I think headsets for the Segway tours are really important to add on there. And then lastly, I just really want to thank you for putting that data together. I live on West Jones Street, and I've seen the increment. Kelly Tours wasn't there 2 months ago. Now it's literally every hour, at least one. The Segway, they're all conglomerating at some point with Mrs. Wilkes there. Everybody wants to point it out, so we're becoming another one of those places where it's getting to be way too much. And we just thank you for all your work.
I live on West Taylor, and I just wanted to make sure that this information is going to be released to the press.
It's open on the website, so they can easily get it, yes. And I have no problem sending it to them.
I think that'd be a good idea.
I really appreciate also the presentation, but I thought it was going to be a little broader than this. So I would like to say the construction dumpsters that we have around the city are really problematic, and the fencing, and that some of them stay there for a year or 2 years, and it was happening even before the pandemic, but now the excuse is, well, we can't get parts. But sometimes stuff is brought in from other areas where they're working on houses or whatever. So that is really a problem. The traffic slowing would certainly be wonderful. on the one-way streets. And trash just continues to be a problem. I don't know what people's mothers didn't tell them. But I don't know what we can do about that.
Industry and citizens, DNA was a part of that. Biggest complaint we heard from the industry was cost, cost, cost. Can't do this because it's cost too much. Can't do the earphones, cost too much. Can't stop, well, let's just self-police. We'll talk to this tour company who, goes to 400 block of Abercorn for the most haunted house in America and tell them to tone it down after 10 o'clock. It doesn't work. The cost is irrelevant. I mean, quality of life is more important than that, but I agree, there has to be some compromise, not just on our side, but on the other side.
Thank you for that presentation. It was really well done, and as we all know, it gets beyond that, but we needed a starting point, so I appreciate you all making that detailed effort to do that. A couple things, I totally am embarrassed to hear the Segways are doing that to you guys, but I'm afraid they put headphones in, they won't hear traffic. So that's just an aside, because that's gonna be the first thing they'll come back with. I live on Whitaker, right in front of the fountain of the park. So I'm seeing now the bicycle tours coming right down the center of the park and around the fountain, 15, 20 bikes, running right through people. And that's only started recently, so that's out of control. So the bicycle tours are getting a little out of control, and they're screaming, which is not helping when they're doing that. But I wanted to bring attention, because one of the points in there was the noise monitors for the decibel levels. And I'm gonna bring Betty into it because she's my neighbor. And we, pre-pandemic, were fighting a STVR that is acting as a assembly hall that has parties, weddings regularly in their courtyard with live bands and DJs going on till 10 o'clock at night and later, with decibel levels ridiculous. I can't even be in my living room watching TV because I can hear the music. But at that time, pre-pandemic, when we were meeting with the city and talking about the noise ordinance, we were promised that they were going to be changing the noise ordinance and putting those boxes in at locations so that they could have a documented, regimented, regulated box. Because, I go out there with my watch with my decibel levels. That's not accurate.
People here tonight, this is about the biggest meeting that I've ever attended, and I've attended a lot of them. I was on the board of the Downtown Neighbors Association for quite a while, and was into preservation issues and all that. What was presented tonight was terrific, and obviously has the interest of everyone here. There are so many more things that some people have already alluded to. I would talk about, for example, these large trucks, these semis that are running over the infrastructure that makes this place beautiful. So there's a whole host of things. My point here is we all have to be engaged all the time. Episodically won't work. DNA does what it can, but individuals can certainly help out if we stay engaged and we lean on the city and lean on the city. They count on us to pay our taxes. They count on us to make this place beautiful. We need to lean on them as much as we can. But my point here is we all need to stay engaged all the time.
Told me that they would never come back because they were afraid of the homeless, the street people. Just wanted to say.
I'll be really quick. Just one thing that, a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, there was, a question about our maintenance of our historic preservation, whether we should get money as a historic district. And the concerns were hotels and the degradation of our historic streets. The amount of traffic, I was really surprised by those numbers, the amount of large vehicles going over our historic streets every day. That's money that this city could lose, because every time, I live on Jones Street, and the bricks come up and they just come back and they just put tar in the spot, they don't re-brick it. And so piece by piece, we're gonna start losing these streets and then our federal designation, and that's a lot of money for the person that was talking about how do we economically show the city